Can you all see my screen?
Yes, it's visible.
Yes.
Okay. So NLP 101 ultimate introduction to Deepak raised hand. Please go ahead, Deepak.
No, that is with respect to PPT. Sorry.
Okay, no problem, no problem. Good. Everyone is active then. Okay. Awesome. Okay, recording has been started. Great job. We are already okay. For those who are joining for the first time, okay. So for those who are joining for the first time or do not know much about me, just wanted to give 30 to 45-second introduction without boring you much. So I'm Ramsri. I'm currently based out of Hyderabad, India. And I've been a lead data scientist with almost 9+ years of work experience. And primarily, I spent almost 8 years in USA, getting my master's and working there for 6 to 7 years in Silicon Valley. And then I stayed in Singapore for a year and a half. That was pretty much my entrepreneurship side of things, where I tried out ideas and I had a pre-seed funded startup. And for the last 1.5 years, I moved back to India and I've been stationed in Hyderabad itself. And as I mentioned, in Singapore, I had a VC-backed NLP startup. I'll let you know more details perhaps sometime later. But currently, what do I do? That's what most people ask, including my close friends. What I do is 3 things. One is I do AI consulting part-time. Then I do AI courses. So mostly NLP courses, recorded courses on Udemy. And I also run a live cohort-based NLP course. And the third thing that I do is basically running NLP micro SaaS. So basically kind of like mini startup that I do with just a small team individually, or I team up with 1 or 2 people. So it's called micro SaaS for the same reason. You can go to ramsri.ai and you can find all the links, perhaps Twitter link, LinkedIn, my YouTube channel where I have a lot of content. So all those links are available at ramsri.ai. You can go there and get connected with me. But without wasting much time, let's get into the actual meat of the conversation. So what's the agenda for today? Before going to teach what I'm going to teach, I want you to understand what you're going to learn so that you're prepared. So it's a NLP 101 session. So basically understanding what is natural language processing, then understanding the different terminology used in NLP, because you might have heard different things like NER, co-reference resolution, all these things. So people use a lot of technical terminology that's specific to NLP, right? So I want to demystify and say that intuitively, whatever you know from language, we want to map that back into technical terms and understand all the technical terms in NLP. And one of the most important thing that we are going to see is what's the difference between research and applied NLP. And I'm going to say something which I haven't told previously on a public platform, which is I will reveal how true or false question generation in question.ai that I currently build, micro SaaS, is built. And you can clearly see where the difference is between in research approach versus applied NLP approach. And last but not the least, and the most important thing is, if you want to master NLP, what do you need to do? How do you need to learn, and what you need to learn, and in which sequence you need to learn things? That's what I'm going to tell. And at the very end, I'm going to just talk 10-15 seconds about the course, the cohort-based course that teaches NLP that I do, that starts on Feb 5th as well. Anyways, without further ado, let's get actually started. Okay. First of all, whenever you hear natural language processing, what comes to your mind? So let's get very, very basic, which is splitting the term natural language and processing. So let's enter into NLP. So whenever someone tells the term natural language, perhaps we as humans think about natural language as speech, text, and if you really extend beyond that, perhaps even sign language that people use who are perhaps not sorry, perhaps who is deaf, etc. They use sign language as well, right? So the main thing is natural language. Whenever we hear the term, usually it refers to text or speech or sign language or any of these. And what's processing? Basically, when someone speaks something to us, or when we read a written content, a document or something like that, we do some inference, right? And what are those kinds of inference? We'll go into those things very soon. But basically, whenever we hear, see, read natural language, we do some interpretations from it. And that those interpretations where we infer, do processing and do reasoning on them, that part is basically the processing part. So natural language processing is simply that. And in this session, we are going to mostly focus on the text side of things because that's the most popular type of NLP that where there are a lot of jobs as well as a lot of activity that goes on. Of course, speech is also another big area, but we'll just focus on text part so that we just get a solid understanding of what NLP is. So NLP is not very new because you would have directly or indirectly seen NLP applications almost on a day-to-day basis around you, be it voice assistants like Alexa, Siri, or Google Home, as well as question answering systems, because whenever you talk with a chatbot or a booking system, it tries to understand your intent of booking a flight, etc., and then directs you to the appropriate team, right? So all these things, and apart from that, text summarization algorithms when you don't want to read the full content. And most of you, when you're visiting new places or new states or countries, you might have used machine translation, that is Google Translate, to translate it into the local language, etc. And again, sentiment analysis is something that you have seen. For those who do not know, if you get some review, if you just want to classify whether it is a positive review or negative review, because sometimes you want to automate that process. And if there is a negative review on your app store or any of the systems, then probably you want to flag it and escalate it to the right team who will solve it for you. So, and also chatbots is another popular area that most of you might know. So all these are NLP applications that you would have seen already. Now, first of all, let's start very, very fundamentally, which is what do we infer from text? So just as a sample text, I took this plot, Batman Begins movie plot. Most of you might know this Batman Begins movie directed by Christopher Nolan. So I took it so that we could relate more and we can try to see what we infer from it and see what are the NLP terms associated with the same inference that we do as humans. So mainly just let's take 30 seconds to read. As a child in Gotham City, Bruce Wayne falls down a dry well and is attacked by a swarm of bats, developing fear of them. So basically, this is the movie plot. And we as humans, when we read this, we understand some things, right? That Bruce Wayne is a person, probably Gotham City is a place, and things like that, right? So let's delve into NLP and map our inferences back to NLP terms. Let's do that. So first thing, you might have heard the thing named entity recognition or NER. What that basically means is we are identifying entities within the text. Entities means entities could be anything. It could be a person name or a location or currency, Entities could be anything that we defined. It could be an organization, a date, or anything like that. For example, if you read as a child in Gotham City, Bruce Wayne, immediately as a human, you recognize that Gotham City is a location. Here, GPE stands for geopolitical entity, basically location, and Bruce Wayne is person. And again, 14 years later is kind of a date, and mafia is an organization. Uh, so when you read some text, you immediately realize that there are some entities here, which is names, places, dates, and locations, and automatically identifying these entities using natural language processing techniques is called as NER, named entity recognition. So next time when you hear NER, do not panic. All it means is that identifying entities or things from the text. So whatever we as humans infer, the same thing. And what are the other things that you realize as soon as you see some text? Basically, you understand the parts of speech, right? You know that Gotham City is a proper noun, and Bruce Wayne is again a proper noun. Comma is a punctuation, and false is a verb, things like that, right? So whatever we infer from reading a text, that is parts of speech, linguistically speaking, the parts of speech like verb, noun, adjective, and all those things, the same things could be identified using natural language processing techniques. And the most popular libraries to do both parts of speech as well as named entity recognition are spaCy and NLTK. So you can use these libraries and do parts of speech and named entity recognition directly. So for every word in the text that you gave, you will get back the corresponding entity as well as parts of speech for it. So whenever people talk about NER, remember it's just identifying entities, and POS means parts of speech tagging, nothing too complex. And what's the other thing? The other thing is coreference resolution. And why is this important? Let's go through. Simply, coreference resolution means resolving the pronouns like his, her, they, them, all these pronouns to their original entities. For example, if you read this sentence, as a child in Gotham City, Bruce Wayne falls down a dry well and is attacked by a swarm of bats, developing a fear of them. So as soon as you read the word them, it is natural for you to know that them refers to the word bats here. And attending the opera, his parents, we know that his refers to Bruce here. But for an algorithm, it's not natural to know that these things, these pronouns refer back to these nouns directly. So even for identifying this, there are different types of algorithms developed, and these algorithms are called as basically this is called as coreference resolution. So basically resolving the pronouns to their original nouns, that is called as coreference resolution. And just some food for thought for you. How do you identify the main character, the protagonist of a movie or an article? How can you chain multiple algorithms? I've only talked about three simple things: NER, named entity recognition; POS, parts of speech tagging; and coreference resolution, that is resolving pronouns. Just combining some of these three, maybe two of these three algorithms, we can identify the main character, that is the protagonist of a movie or an article. It might not be even a movie. If it's talking about, let's say, some other event or phone or anything like that, we know how we can automatically identify the main central character of that. If anyone got any idea, I want them to speak up how they can just chain algorithms and identify whatever we discussed.
Hey Ramshri.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe I'm not sure of the order of things, but
Sure, go
maybe
ahead.
we can identify or apply NER first and find out all the proper, all the named entities who are like persons. Or if it is events, then it would not fall in persons, maybe it would fall in organizations or other categories. Then after that, we can apply co-reference resolution on the whole passage to find out the cluster corresponding to only those persons. They are typically going to be clusters, right? Because there'll be multiple references of them throughout the passage. And then probably the one which has the highest cluster length, or which starts from the very beginning of the passage, that would probably most likely correspond to the main character or main event of the article. This would be my approach.
Absolutely. I mean, you're perfectly in the right target area. So basically, that's the answer, which is, for example, here you have Bruce, right? So if we really do co-reference resolution on Bruce, this refers back to Bruce Wayne. And similarly, after attending the opera with his parents, his also refers back to Bruce Wayne. So what you do is you can do co-reference resolution so that his is replaced with Bruce Wayne and Bruce is replaced with Bruce Wayne, the person. And all you do is just get the highest count NER, named entity recognition, and you already have the main protagonist of the movie who is referenced the highest number of times. Please go ahead, Ankit.
Wouldn't POS and co-reference help, Ramsey? Because POS is also actually giving you a link to most of the, let's say, centralized values, right? Be it the name or something. Just
Very
a quick
good
question.
point. Very good point, actually. So there is something called as dependency parsing. So POS just gives what does each word's original parts of speech is. Building on top of POS, there is a concept called as dependency parsing, where once you get dependency parsing, that's also available easily with Spatie and other things. What you get is you get the main central subject verb object kind of relationship that you have in linguistics. And once you get the subject verb object relationships, you can perhaps gather all the subjects in different sentences and cluster them together, and you can get the main central subject that is being talked about. But great point. Expanding on POS, we have something called as dependency parser that gives more information, that is the central talking point subject of that particular sentence, etc.
Right. Thanks.
Awesome. Great job in pointing that out as well. Amazing. Cool. Moving further on, what are the other things that are popular in NLP is basically keyword and key phrase extraction. So a keyword could be anything. It could be a verb or noun. And when I talk about phrase, basically it's a combination of multiple words. And sometimes it could be an adjective with verb, which is called as verb phrase, or adjective with noun, which is called as noun phrase. So keywords, so keywords and key phrases are basically these central important words or combination of words that we can extract from any content. And as we read through this, automatically we humans again identify a lot of keywords from these keywords or key phrases like this. Rachel Dawes, Gotham City, Bruce Wayne, Drive Well, all these things. It's natural for us to directly extract things. And I think keywords are somewhat subjective. You cannot necessarily argue that something is a keyword or not for that thing, because when it comes to something like parts of speech, it is very clear from linguistic standpoint that this is a verb, this is a noun, etc. But when it comes to keyword, it depends on the context, because when you're talking about a medical text, then perhaps the real nouns might not be the actual keywords for the medical context. But if you're talking about stories like this, then proper nouns might be the keywords for this. So it's a bit subjective, but all I want to recognize is that there's this central concept called as keyword and key phrase extraction as well. Okay, moving further on, there's again sentiment analysis, which comes under classification. What is classification? In simple terms, let's say on Rotten Tomatoes or even Book My Show, you see movie reviews, and all you want to just classify is whether that movie review is positive or negative. So just clustering it into pre-known segments, that is what classification is. And sentiment analysis, usually you have positive, neutral, and negative. Those are the sentiments. Sentiments simply means your classification of it, either it is positive or neutral or negative, or you can do even classification depending on your task. If you have, let's say, you want to categorize people into 5 different buying segments, like upper middle class, and lower middle class, rich class and poor, something like that. So classification depends on how many segments you define manually and put people into those buckets, or any text or any processing or any segment of text into that bucket. That's basically what classification is. And here sentiment analysis, another popular NLP task. Let's keep moving ahead. So other thing is topic modeling. You might have heard it many times, but so the term confuses people. Rather, I want you to just mind map yourself topic modeling to genre. For example, if all you're given is a lot of text and you don't know what are the central themes of the text, what you do is finally you cluster all the texts into multiple segments. For example, I give you a lot of random text, then you can segment it into law, medical, legal, medical, or educational, entertainment, and other things, right? So you can take any text and you can automatically find similar grouped words, and then once you glance at the similar group words, you can give a topic to it. Topic could be, like I mentioned, just rephrase in your mind as genre. For example, if you see that a plaintiff, lawyer, and all these things, all these litigation, all these words come up in one cluster, you can just take the cluster and give the genre of legal or something like that. So basically, topic modeling means, for example, if someone gave you movie plots, they gave all the 5,000 movies that were released in the last 10 years or something like that. Automatically, what you can do is you can convert them into vectors. We'll go a little bit into vectors soon, but basically you can cluster all the movie plots into probably top 5 or 10 clusters, and you can identify that each cluster represents some kind of group of words, and you can give those group of words a topic, also known as genre, if you want. And that could be in case of movies, it could be action, adventure, horror, drama, or romance, and all these things, right? So always map topic modeling to one of these. And you do topic modeling when there is no label data. What does that mean? If you have labeled data that Batman belongs to adventure and action, and 50 First Dates belongs to romance and love, then what you can do is you can actually take all the data and train a classifier on it. But when there is absolutely no label data, that's when you go for topic modeling, where you are automatically trying to cluster and identify the topics or classes or genres within that automatically. So just remember this distinction, that if there are already labels, you do classification. If there are no labels, then you try to identify what are the important sectors or genres within that using topic modeling. Go ahead, Naman.
This topic modeling we apply for the unsupervised learning.
Yes, that is true. Yeah, that is true. Is it clear?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. Then the other thing is word sense disambiguation. So a lot of people say about word sense disambiguation, WSD. Go ahead, Lalit.
Hello. Yeah. Hi, Ram. So regarding like your previous question, previous discussion about topic modeling,
Right.
it's like, is it like in the semi-supervised also? It is like both can be worked out, like classification and the topic together. Like some information is there, let's say for me, and I can classify, but there's some information is missing. New information which even like whatever label I applied, I'm not able to, like, I don't know some labels, so I need to know that. So for that I need to learn using the topic modeling, that both can work in this in this case.
Yeah. So I mean, if you want to mix semi-supervised with this, what happens is that basically you can do either of these things. Basically, you can define the topics and then try to map all the content to those topics if you do not want to automatically come up with topics yourself. Because if you know that there are 10 topics that I want to classify, then it becomes easier for you to cluster each one into these 10 topics. If you do soft clustering, basically each movie plot can fall into multiple genres, etc. And the other thing is basically if you have a few labeled items already, then what you can do is you can identify, you can train a small model on top of what you already have labels for, and then you can start the rest of the movies or topics, rest of the movies or content with those soft labels, and then you can iterate on that as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the other thing is word sense disambiguation. It's a very interesting topic, also known as WSD, word sense disambiguation, because a lot of languages have these words that depends on the context. So the meaning of a word is contextually dependent on where it is coming. Because even if you take a simple word like bat, for example, if you take the first sentence where Bruce Wayne was attacked by a bat while he was walking in a cave, then you know that we are referring to bat the mammal, the nocturnal mammal, right? But if you take the second sentence where a local gang attacked Bruce Wayne with a bat, then you know that bat is a club used for hitting ball, kind of like attacked with Bruce Wayne is attacked with a bat. That is a physical thing. So basically here what you need to realize is that there are a lot of these words in English as well as in other languages which have contextual meaning. For example, bank. Bank could mean river bank or the financial institution bank. Or mouse. A simple word like mouse could mean an animal, or it could mean a computer mouse. And basically the context and the meaning of that word, depends quite a lot on the context, right? And for you in natural language processing, it's very important to even decipher the context corresponding to it. For example, if I want to create a multiple choice question, like the local gang attacked Bruce Wayne with what? And the correct answer is bat. Then if you want to give the wrong answers, then you need to know what bat stands for in this context, right? Because if you get bat as mammal, then you give other nocturnal animals as the wrong answers, right? So it is very important for you to resolve the contextual meaning of a word. And this is called as word sense disambiguation. And as a short primer for you, if you want to really understand what are the different senses, that is different contextual meanings of a given word, you can use WordNet. WordNet basically has all the different senses of a given word. So if you just enter a word known as bat, maybe you'll get 4 different senses, contextual meanings. One as nocturnal animal, and the other as cricket bat, baseball bat, and other things. So you can use WordNet to get what are all the different contextual meanings possible for a given word. And moving further on, go ahead, Prasanna.
Yeah, Ramsey. So you said about the WordNet, right? So what if I need to do something for other language other than English, say for example Tamil or Telugu?
Okay, great point. So WordNet is kind of like manually curated, and what WordNet does is you can use some algorithms on top of WordNet to get the contextual meaning, but WordNet does not itself give the contextual meaning. Rather, it is kind of like a dictionary that collects all the different contextual meanings for a given word. And for your exact case, what happens is that there are advanced algorithms based on transformers, especially BERT. So using BERT, you can get the contextual meaning of a given word. So using BERT, you can do word sense disambiguation. So what simply means is that for the language of your choice, you need to train a multilingual BERT model. It could be BERT or any other similar models like Robota, etc., to classify the word into its possible senses. And the other thing is that you need to have some kind of reference, because for the language, you need to prepare what kind of different senses could be, contextual meanings could be possible for each word. So you can see if WordNet is available in other languages, perhaps probably not for Indian languages. The main thing is that you can kind of train something with multilingual models like XLM, Robota, and other things. But it needs hand curation and training data from your end. So it's not straightforward. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Cool. And the other thing is embeddings. Embeddings. Let me mute other participants. Sorry about that. Okay, cool. So basically, embeddings is a very, very central aspect. And I want you to pay serious attention to it and understand it. So mainly what happens is that once you can get a word into an embedding, or a sentence into an embedding, or a document into an embedding, now you can do mathematical calculations with those embeddings. And for those who do not understand what the word embeddings, all it simply means is that for a given word, you get a vector that is a long list of numbers, floating point numbers. For example, for child, you might get 768 length vector, a list of numbers. So that's simply what an embedding is. And so similarly, an embedding could be available for a given word, and a sentence can also have an embedding. Sometimes what you can do is you can say this, take the same word embedding model, and you can just average out the word embeddings for each of the word in this and get the sentence embeddings. But modern algorithms do it differently and in a much better fashion. But at the end of the day, I want you to understand this thing, that a word or a sentence or a full document could be converted into a single vector of some fixed size length of 768 dimensions or something like that. And when I mean embeddings, it's just a fixed list of numbers. And why is it very, very powerful? Simply now you can do mathematical calculations. By mathematical calculations, I mean you can find in the vector space which words are closer to each other and which sentences are closer to each other, which documents are closer to each other. So you can build even recommendation system. By that I mean, for example, if you are able to convert Batman Begins into a vector and you converted all the movies into a vector, all you can do is get the Batman Begins vector and search for the nearest vector, because now you have a vector, and in the embedding space, you can do all these mathematical calculations. And automatically you get back similar movies like Lego Batman movie, Joker, and the sequel of Batman Begins, all these movies automatically. Almost it's like a recommendation engine, right? So once you build these embeddings, that is the vector or list from words, sentences, it becomes very powerful because you can do all these kinds of mathematical calculations, etc. Amazing. Like I mentioned, you can build recommendation systems, basically find similar items, because you can take Batman Begins, embed it into a vector, and you can embed all the 5,000 movies that got released previously into a vector, find the closest vector to Batman Begins vector, and you get Dark Knight, that is the sequel of Batman Begins. So you can build some kind of recommendation system. Of course, modern recommendation systems are complex, whereas this similarity search is only a part of it. And what are the other popular themes of natural language processing is basically text generation systems. You might have seen the basic text generation systems that everyone is aware of, which is translation, right? So you can take this sentence and you can convert it into Spanish. So you can just paste this in Google Translate and you know that it's converted it into Spanish. So text generation systems are very, very popular and kind of the building blocks of the modern NLP systems. What the power of modern NLP systems is unlocked in building these text generation systems. And few examples are translation. Paraphrasing is again another one. Basically, you take the same set of words, but you rephrase with a different choice of words. Because why is paraphrasing interesting? Because sometimes you do not write good grammar. Then automatically you can paraphrase your sentence into standard grammatical form. Or if you are not a sophisticated English speaker, then you can automatically paraphrase it into a more formal tone or things like that when you are applying for colleges, things like that, etc. So paraphrasing is also very useful. And one of the central thing that a lot of people talk about in NLP is language model. That is very, very crucial, and it is the most powerful technique that is the basis of modern NLP tools like OpenAI's GPT-3, etc. So with GPT-3, you can build a lot of applications. It's a language model that is trained by this company called as OpenAI, and they released GPT-3 as an API, paid API. Anyone can use and build systems on top of that. But at the end of the day, a language model is nothing but it's a blank filling algorithm. For example, you just give this sentence: as a child in Gotham City, Bruce Wayne falls, and developing a dash. So whenever you have dash, if you are a human reading this sentence, you can perhaps come up with 10 different choices for this fill in the blank, right? The correct answer is fear, but if you are a human reading this, because you have the previous context, you can come up with perhaps 10 or 15 choices for this. And what happens is that the more context that you have, then your fill in the blank prediction becomes better and better, so that even if you just let an algorithm train on this, which is you give this as the input and fill in the blank is the output that the algorithm should guess. And if you train with billions of sentences like this, where you give an input text and it should generate just one more word or token, if it's just trained on this, what happens is that inherently it will try to understand what language is, because you show all the possible text of English that is available on the internet and you train somebody with like this, they're going to automatically understand context. And then if you ask them to fill in the blank next time, whatever they are going to fill up doesn't look unnatural, right? It will look natural. And what happens is that if you just keep filling these blanks sequentially and just keep writing at length, you will generate some kind of story, and that story looks very, very plausible and natural for humans as well. if a large language model trained on a lot of data just extends this text. Basically, that's the core of language model, and all the modern NLP systems are developed on this one context. The longer the context, the better you get at predicting the next word. And the other things are, you might be aware of chatbots and conversational AI, right? So intent classification, by that I mean whether I am asking for a refund to a bank or whether I am looking for a new credit card. Whenever I type something, automatically you can classify it into one of the intents. So the user intent, you can capture whether he wants a refund or a credit card is lost or a bank transaction has failed, whatever it is, and you can automatically direct it to the right team, right? So that's what you can do. And with chatbots, there are a lot of opportunities, as well as conversational AI is very popular. You might have already encountered it. And I just wanted to take 5 minutes to just give you a intuition about what is it to convert a sentence or a paragraph into a vector. Because I talked about converting something into a vector, and most people who are new to NLP might not have understood how can something be converted into a vector. So I'm basically going to explain you the same thing. So simply take that these are 4 different documents. Of course, these are just sentences for now, but I want just, instead of giving a long document and trying to operate on that, I just took these simple 4 sentences, and I want you to imagine that these are 4 different documents with different text. And what is the simplest way you can convert this first sentence into a vector is basically you can count the word frequency. That means you can count how many times Ramsri comes. So there are in total 6 words here. Ramsri is teaching an NLP course, and Ramsri comes 1/6 of the time, right? Because there are 6 words. So simply you can convert Ramsri into 0.166, which is 1/6, the value of 1/6. And similarly, if you want to create a vector, what you can do is you can combine all the unique words in these 4 documents or sentences. All the unique words are captured here, including Mark and Jason and other things. And for this first sentence, you can create a vector like this, which is simply Ramsri is 1/6, so 0.166, and teaching is also 1/6. And you can create a vector like this. And sentence 4, again, you can create a vector like this, because teaching again is 1/7 here. That's why you have 0.142. Simply, you can convert this sentence 1, Ramsri is teaching an NLP course, into this vector. This vector could be just a unique combination of all the words that occur, and you give some score based on the word frequency. Now, capturing the word frequency, that is how many times Ramsri comes within this sentence, that is called as term frequency. But there is another metric that you can capture. How many times does Ramsri come in all the documents? That means there are 4 documents and Ramsri comes only 2 times, right? So you can call that the document frequency of Ramsri is half, because it comes in 2 out of 4 times. Whereas the term frequency of Ramsri in this sentence, it is 1/6. In this sentence, it is 0 because Ramsri is not present. Simply, you can calculate 2 different statistics. One is how many times does a word come in one particular sentence, that is term frequency, and how many times does a word come in all the documents combined, that is document frequency. So as I told, Ramsri's document frequency is 0.5. Teaching is 1 because it comes in every single of them. Jason is 1/4 because Jason comes in only out of the 4 documents, right? Now, what can you do is basically you can multiply this vector, that is the document frequency vector, with term frequency vector. Simply, you are capturing two things: how frequent a word is within a document and how rare a word is across the documents. So just using these two simple statistics, you can multiply these two statistics and you can get a vector for each of the word, right? So simply I just wanted to give you an intuition about how a sentence could be converted into a vector, how a word like Ramsri could be converted into a vector, things like that. Now, why is it important and why is it powerful? Simply, you can get the vector for third sentence and first sentence. And you know that if you just multiply corresponding elements, you get a high score for first sentence and third sentence, but not with first sentence and fourth sentence, because Ramsri and other words are not matching. So you can find similar documents, etc. easily. I didn't want to go much deeper into converting it into vectors, etc. But this is the intuition. Basically, you can take a word and you can convert it into a vector. And once you have the vector space, you can compare against each other. So a word's importance is captured here by how frequently a word comes in a document, and also capturing its rarity by capturing the semantics across the documents. And so a word importance could be calculated by just multiplying term frequency with inverse document frequency. We just need to take inverse because word importance is indirectly proportional to document frequency. I'll tell you why. Because if a single word comes in every document, that is teaching here, comes in every document, then we know that it's not perhaps an important word. If JSON comes in only one document, then you know that, oh, perhaps if it comes in very less documents, then it might be a keyword or important word. That's why word importance is inversely proportional to document frequency. But at the end of the day, there is a simple algorithm called as TF-IDF, which is just multiplying term frequency with inverse document frequency. I just wanted you to give you an intuition on this. And by the end of the day, you can just get TF-IDF vector for this sentence, something like this. And now you can compare the vectors. Now I'm going to give you some break. And basically you will interact with other peers who have attended. Almost we have 60 people here. So what's the agenda? Basically each one take a minute or two to introduce yourself, where you're joining from and what's your profession, whether you're a student, graduate, or working, and talk about anything interesting that you are learning or planning to learn, and any experience with NLP, and share any social media profile of yours. I'll tell you one thing, those who are not interested and cannot join, all you need to do is do not accept the request to go into a breakout room and just remain here. Those who want to interact, just accept the breakout room invitation. And for those people who are not going into the breakout rooms, just stay here, and within 10 minutes, we'll be back into our action and continue with the rest of the talk. Okay. Are we good? Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So briefly, I'll introduce the difference between real world NLP, that is practical NLP, and theoretical NLP. So very recently, I launched true or false question generator at Question.ai. It's not still available for everyone. It's only available for B2B clients. But I'll walk you through the flow so that you'll understand where the power actually is in the practical NLP side. So I was discussing with a researcher friend. I told him the problem that I was facing. Hey, I have this long block of text. That means a person can enter like a whole story or whole movie plot or something like that, and they want to generate true or false questions from that. So The input is, assume that this is the input. You have some article Elon Musk has shown he can influence the digital currency market. And it's a long article. I did not write everything. I just wrote some bit and I gave it here. Now my goal is I want to create true or false questions like this. Jeff Bezos has shown he can influence the digital currency. This is false because the article actually has Elon Musk, but I replace this and I want to generate something like this. And again, following the distinct, this is a true statement from the article. So my goal is I want to give this as the input and I want to generate this as the output. Now, when I was talking with the researcher friend, like we came up with a flow. The flow works like this. First of all, whenever there is a large blob of content, our goal is to find important sentences from that, because if you want to give true or false questions like this, you have to pick statements that you want to give true or false statements first. So the first step is actually finding important sentences from the big blob of text. And those important sentences could be perhaps even summarization algorithm, right? So perhaps you can summarize this long context into this summary. Great. Now you got some summary of it. Now the next thing that you need to do is you need to do co-reference resolution, that is pronoun resolution of the summary. Why do you need to do that? Because perhaps the summary will contain something like this. A day later, he tweeted again saying, to be clear, or following the two distinct statements from him, the world's largest cryptocurrency hit a 2-month low. Now, if you just take this statement and try to give true or false, because true or false stands independently, you cannot have him as it is, right? You need to replace that with Elon Musk. So just summarization is not sufficient. After summarization, you need to actually do co-reference resolution as well, because you need to have independent sentences that do not have pronouns as the main verbs, main subject, right? And then comes your sentence negation algorithm. Perhaps you can use GPT-3 or something like that, and you can take this original sentence and falsify it to give true or false. Then automatically GPT-3 can convert Elon Musk to Jeff Bezos, or it can convert low to high. That's also a false statement. So in order to even deploy the true or false question generation as an API, for me, I have these bottlenecks, which is I need to do summarization to get important sentences. I need to do co-reference resolution, that is the pronouns need to be replaced with the original nouns. And then I can take those individual sentences and create true or false questions from it. So the flow that me and the researcher friend that I was talking to, we came up with this basic flow. But I cannot go and implement that because, first of all, any summarization algorithm, the best ones also take like probably 10 to 12 seconds on CPU to generate. If I use GPU, I can generate summary in 2-3 seconds. It's not real time, right? If I use CPU, then what happens is that I need to have GPU inference. For those who are not aware, CPU and GPU stand. CPU is for the GPU is for graphical processing units. Unit. It is faster, but at higher cost as well. So simply put, if I have to deploy this API of true or false, I need to bring up the first API for summarization, second API for pronoun resolution. These two itself take me $400 and $400, $800, and then whatever GPT-3 costs are for this. So far I've been avoiding this completely because I cannot go ahead and invest $800 every month to keep this API up and running. This is the researcher flow, but always you need to find a way to cut corners. And when it comes to practical implementation, I think the cost savings come into handy, and you need to think creatively. So what I did was I cut down these two GPU deployments, that is $800 cost, and I replaced it with a Spacy dependency parser, where simply I took all the sentences, I passed them to the dependency parser, I identified the main central noun or phrase, and I cross-checked whether that phrase is a pronoun or noun. If it's a pronoun, I discard it. If it's a noun, I use it. So what happens is that I'm not actually able to convert these sentences that have him into Elon Musk, but at least if there is a first sentence like this, Elon Musk has shown he can influence the digital currency market, I can use this sentence directly. I can use the second sentence directly. And perhaps this sentence, I totally ignore it because it has he. So simply what has happened is that I could replace these two GPU deployments and I could just deploy on AWS Lambda serverlessly the dependency parser part, and I have the sentence negation as it is. So what happened for me was I could cut down these steps and involve this. So my $800 GPU cost is lessened to like $5, whatever it costs for me for the GPT-3 negation, and very little for AWS Lambda. So this is the main difference between theoretical assumptions of it and going the practical route. I just gave you an example, but there are several approaches to it and several ways to reduce the cost. But overall, if you are on the practical side of implementation, then you need to find ways to save costs while maintaining the end goal that you want to achieve as well. Go ahead, Lalit.
Yeah, like just I'm saying, like with this, like you might be missing a lot of part of the paragraphs or the full what I say is full, you might be missing some part of the paragraphs in the because of you missing some sentence, not doing the conference resolution.
Right, that is absolutely true. But the only thing is that for me, if I have, let's say, a large context, and if I am able to generate 5 or 6 true or false questions, that's enough for me to deliver the value initially at an MVP level. So that's the main reason why I chose this approach to save costs on my end. And the main thing is that a question paper or an assessment will have probably 10 questions. Out of them, multiple choice will be few, true or false will be few, etc. So our goal is to at least give 4 or 5 high quality true or false. And it's ideal if we can do co-reference resolution and summarization and all of that. It's ideal. But from a cost saving point of view, as well as from a deployment point of view as an MVP, we can take these trade-offs for now. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Like just for the people, actually, these trade-offs, people know. That's why I asked this question.
Okay. Got it. Yeah.
Hi, Ram.
Yeah, please go ahead, Plavan.
Yeah, like you're anyway using AWS Lambda function, right? So even co-reference resolution that can be spawned as like we can have multiple Lambda functions and we can have them communicate, right?
That is true. So the only thing is that for any heavy running algorithms, so for any heavy running algorithms, what happens is that we do have cold start issues because of Lambda, right? So even if you have like a torch model loaded in Lambda, you can actually deploy that with Docker, etc.
Yes.
But what happens is that there's cold start, which is
first time it will have.
Yeah.
Yes.
So a lot of times when you're especially using Lambda's cold start, it disrupts the user experience in one way.
Okay.
That's the main reason. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Thanks, Ram. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we'll kind of skip over this slide. Basically, it's just the difference between delivering value with the practical projects. I mean, being a practical NLP practitioner versus a theoretical learner, how you need to deliver value. I don't think there's anything crucial here. Anyone building NLP startups? So since we do not have that much time, that's why I would encourage you to type in the chat if you are building any NLP startups or even open source libraries, etc. Feel free to promote themselves. And let's quickly go over the steps to become an NLP data scientist. And once we are done with this, probably in 5-10 minutes, we'll open the floor for questions and I'll try to answer all of your questions. Let's keep moving ahead. So the main thing people ask all the time is that how do I get started with NLP? And the second thing is, what is the sequence that I need to follow for getting good at NLP? So I've laid out at least my version of it that people can follow. So the first thing is, instead of even deep diving into ML and deep learning, first I want you to understand and play around with just words and splitting sentences into words or tokens. So learn about n-grams. N-grams are basically, if you combine 2 words or 3 words, then it becomes a trigram. 1 word is unigram and 2 words is bigram. So you can learn about just n-grams and word frequencies. So we have talked a little bit about word frequency in the TF-IDF, where you count how many times a word comes, etc. So simply start with just Python and text analysis with just string splitting. You can do all these things like n-grams, word frequencies, and I told you about TF-IDF and gave an intuition of that. Lemmatization is nothing but if you have different verb forms like running, ran, all these things, you can convert it into just single word, run. Now, I told you about TF-IDF. Now, the only thing is that understand how TF-IDF vectorization and once you calculate TF-IDF, how it can be used for classification, summarization, and keyword extraction and similarity matching. So basically, if you get the top TF-IDF words within a sentence or a document, then you get the keywords. And how you can do classification is basically you can convert any document into this TF-IDF vector, and then you can do the classification based on that. And once you're done with TF-IDF, what I would encourage you all the time is implement a keyword extraction algorithm. Because once you try to implement a keyword extraction algorithm, something like topic rank, etc., you will understand word distributional semantics. What does that even mean? How do word co-occurrences occur? That means any word will have some left context as well as right context, basically left words and right words, right? So you can understand how you can group, you can maintain some running context and build a small graph out of it. So given any document or movie plot, etc., you can form this vector, graph-based algorithm, and then you can use something like text rank, etc., which is one of the algorithms that powers even Google search, where pages are ranked based on how popular they are. So you can use these to, so if you implement a keyword extraction algorithm like topic rank, etc., from ground up, then you'll understand this word distributional semantics, how word co-occurrences occur, etc. Then what you can do next is basically learn a little bit of theory and train a simple word-to-vec algorithm using GenSim on some text corpus. The text corpus could be anything like just movie plots, etc. And what happens is that basically you will see how relationships can be captured between words using these. And once you implement a word-to-vec algorithm, then you can see how similar words come together by just neural network algorithms, etc. And understand the main difference between TF-IDF and word vectors. Simply in TF-IDF, what happens is that you take the whole corpus and you create a vector that is almost as long as the whole corpus. So if the corpus, that is the text content, has 50,000 words, then every sentence will be converted into a 50,000 word vector although it is sparse means only few values are filled in and the rest of them are idle. But what happens in word vector case is that you have a dense vector. That means instead of having this 50,000 vector, you will have a short vector, probably 328 or 728 or something like that. And every word or sentence could be converted into this dense vector. And once you get this context, shift focus to, just give me 1 second. Just give me. Okay. Okay. So once you understand TF-IDF, etc., what you can do is you can shift focus to understanding data collection, because oftentimes data sets is a very big thing in NLP. So most of the times people say that it's not, data sets are not available, but I will tell you that if you learn a little bit of web scraping with Beautiful Soup, etc., as well as some non-technical tools, as even no-code tools like ParsHub, etc., you can collect your own data and also do data visualization and learn front-end visualizations with Gradio and Streamlit, etc. And once you're done with that, learn a little bit of machine learning so that classification algorithms and clustering, all these things are clear to you on a high level. Don't get stuck in theory. And next thing that I would advise is topic modeling. I talked about topic modeling a little bit, but instead of the pro tip is that instead of starting with topic modeling algorithms like LDA and other older ones, start with newer age models like BERT. So basically from BERT vectors, learn about how you can cluster them and create topic models from there using sentence vectors and others. And then the next thing to learn would be LSTMs, RNNs, and transformers. And again, don't get stuck in theory. And people always fear transformers. And what I say to them is learn the minimum amount of transformer knowledge, get the minimum amount of transformer knowledge to be operational. That is, just learn one encoder algorithm like BERT, one decoder algorithm like GPT-2, and one encoder decoder algorithm like T5. And the main important thing is to learn sentence transformers. Those are the newer age algorithms, and that will be the beginning of modern age semantic search for you. You can see how modern semantic search algorithms are built on top of that. And once you go beyond that, I will actually ask you to learn a little bit of actually language and grammar structure, because in order to actually deliver value without using transformer algorithms for everything, if you learn about language and grammar structure, you can use dependency and constituency parsing, etc., and learn computational linguistics, that is the language side of NLP. So even understanding things like what is the structure of simple sentence, complex sentence, and compound sentence, all these things will help you a long way in building NLP systems. Then the next thing is to learn about text generation and language models like GPT-3. Learn about prompt engineering with GPT-3 and similar text generation models like T0, etc., and build NLP products with it. And the last slide is basically about deploying the code. So learn about containerizing code into Docker and packaging and containerizing your code and deploying the Docker as an API on both server and serverless platforms, probably like AWS, Lambda, and other things. And if you really want to build products with NLP, once you have an API, what you can do is you can sell your unique API on Rapid API, or you can go ahead and build a full-scale web app with things like, with tools like Bubble, Webflow, etc. If you want to build full-scale products, that's what I would advise. I'll only take 30 seconds before going into the Q&A. So basically, I'm running a 4-week practical intro to NLP code-based course that starts on Feb 5th and ends on Feb 27th. Classes are on Saturday and Sunday evening, 6 to 8 p.m. If you want, you can enroll by going to this link, ramsri.ai/NLP. And if you're directly enrolling on Maven, use this coupon code earlybird20. So the first 10 enrollments are at a discount, basically 19,999 for 19,999 INR. And once the 10 enrollment limit passes, the prices increase. I will not waste any of your time, and let's get straight to questions. Feel free to ask me, feel free to raise your hand and I'll bring you, you can raise your hand and ask any questions. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Ram, not a question, but like a request, like you had this cohort based course, right? So
Yes.
why don't you like start something for this NLP like roadmap which you showed, right?
Huh.
Why don't you start something of that sort? That also will be very beneficial, actually. Like,
Okay, so you were part of the first cohort, right? So
yes.
the main thing is that whatever roadmap that I have, a part of that, a baseline of that, maybe a good 70% or 60%
Yes.
chunk of it is taught in the
Cohort.
actual course.
Yes.
But for the rest of them, actually, if you take basically to deliver the whole content, it's a, I would say 3-month or 4-month content. And I think running such large cohorts have challenges, right? So that's why I've fine-tuned it to deliver what I could distill in like a 1-month cohort.
Okay.
And for the rest of them, I always encourage people to, whenever people reach out to me, I give references on what they can follow to learn, or they can schedule one-on-one call, whoever wants to understand more and deploy things, right? So, yeah.
Thanks, Ram. Thank you.
Basically, the short answer is that it's very intensive to teach everything in NLP.
Yes.
So you have to somehow distill it and make a smaller version of it. Yeah.
Thank you, Ram.
Yeah, sure. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions.
Hey Ramsri, Lalit.
Hi, Lalit. Please.
As you know, I am working on a short text customer reviews and things. So what is the things to take care? Mainly what I found is like very difficult, like the data is very like junk, like, it's cleaning, a lot of data is cleaning is required in a short text, mainly customer reviews and social media data. What are the techniques what you suggest to clean properly before using any NLP things on top?
I mean, there are a few challenges in cleaning, in the sense that, first of all, what is the format that you are looking for is very important, because I mean, the way I would go about cleaning short text for the given task is that a lot of texts are incomplete. So first thing is that I would apply something like a dependency parser and other things to make sure that all the linguistic components are there. I mean, probably like just making sure that the subject verb object relationship is there, and if the sentences are not finishing abruptly and other things like that. Then the other thing is basically just classifying with few shot learning. So you can use GPT-3 or something like that to create, you can even classify stuff with GPT-3 and fine tuning and other things, right? So just hand tag probably like 100 or 500 examples, and then you can use that as the basis to, pass every other short text to the classification, so that you already have high quality filter through that. And then you can do any manual tagging beyond that as well. So in 2 steps, one thing is that I would do, depending on the context of what you're trying to solve, using just computational linguistics and sentence structures and other things, having some fine-tuned, having some baseline filtering there, then doing a few shot learning fine-tuning with GPT-3 or something similar, and then taking care of that. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, it is very helpful.
Sure. Yeah.
Hi Ramsri,
Yeah.
Deepak here.
Hi, Deepak. Please go ahead. Yeah.
How you get updated, I mean, on a daily basis or monthly basis about the advances in NLP? Do you follow any as such? Because more often there are many in the open source, but we quite doubtful which to follow. So how you get updated in the field of NLP?
Great question. So I think the biggest advice that I follow and I tell to other people is that only follow leaps, not deltas. By that I mean, see, once GPT-3 got released, there is a text generation model. I mean, you have GPT-3, right? Now every 6 months there is GPT-J, then there is T0 and all these things, and it is extremely hard to keep up with all of these things, to be very honest. So what I do is, once there is a text generation algorithm and that made the leap with GPT-3, I double down on GPT-3 and spend time in understanding and deeply looking into that. So I just keep a track of what got released, like T0, GPT-J and other models, but I don't really do active exploration and development on that, because it is too much of an overload to follow deltas every time. You can follow leaps. And in text generation, I'll tell you, if you just want to condense the last 2.5 years into one, simply there is T0. If you master T0 very well, you can build really full-scale products. Then the second thing is GPT-3. Sorry, not T0, I meant T5. If you just master T5 and know the input, output, and train such models, you can do all the things. Then GPT-3. So for me, the whole of text generation in the last 2.5 years is basically understanding T5 perfectly, what can text generation do, and playing around with that. Then using, that is one on the open source end. Then there is not open source, but provided as an API, OpenAI's GPT-3. So this is what I follow and spend my time in. And like I mentioned, follow leaps, not deltas. And how do you know whether something is a leap or delta is basically, sometimes you have to take a call with experience, because there are a lot of things coming every day, like active learning, meta learning, reinforcement learning. If you just wake me up and ask, even I don't know how to even answer what the definition means for some of these things. Basically, they are fanciness created by researchers for, research has a different goal, because most people hate to admit, but 90% of the research is useless. I know exactly how PhDs work, where funding goes and all those things. So I'll say it with dareness, but I will not say it on a large stage because it will offend a lot of people. But simply, the thing is that giving a delta to the world is not the goal. If you are a PhD student, you need to publish a paper and you need to make sure that there's some delta in it, and you need to run some benchmarks and then publish it. Now, you need to make it sound revolutionary. It's like almost YouTubers putting nice thumbnails to draw a lot of attention, right? So it works similarly like that in research. I mean, I've published papers previously, and I know like very close computer vision and NLP research friends, so I know exactly how it works. So that's why I do not follow deltas at all and any like high taglines that show up. Rather, I follow leaps. Simply put, pick something that is interesting, spend the next 6 months to 1 year on that, leverage that fully to build products as well as other things. But other than that, just don't keep jumping on one model to another. Yeah, that's my suggestion.
Thank you, Rams.
Yeah.
And one more question I would like to ask. Kind of most of the guys who joined here in this meeting or kind of thing, they
Hmm.
are kind of what I expect is they are new to NLP or because of that interest they have joined here.
Hmm.
But how well your course? I mean, because that 4 week course will take us to at least throw some light on to us from starting some basics because no one, not as every point will be taught in NLP,
Right.
but what we can expect from that 4 week course because
Hmm.
um, uh, beat can you throw any some light on that so that we will have more idea whether what we get out of spending that 4 week course, whether it will be of any and kind of any elaboration or kind of what we can expect from there, because the roadmap which you have given that is very crystal clear because I have also done certification on that, but I don't have
Hmm.
any real time experience. But
Got it.
whether these integrates kind of everything about this TF-IDF or will that be taught on that or kind of,
Hmm.
because more of theory doesn't help, even I face that
Yeah.
kind of any practical only make you better at NLP. Can you comment anything on this?
Sure, sure. So, I mean, very true. I mean, I myself hate theory so much that I don't teach much theory. Apart from TF-ID of theory, there is literally not much theory or anything like that. It's more focused towards delivering an end goal. So coming to the course as such, see, the reason why I prepared the course is one main thing, that I've been doing NLP consulting for the last 2 years, and I have distilled just the right, the condensed version that I would really want. Uh, I wish this was there when I started my consulting. That's the course that I prepared. And second thing is that it's very focused on all the aspects of data collection, data visualization, then deployment as well in serverless manner and as well as Dockerizing. And beyond that, the rest of the things like topic modeling and everything, even TF-IDF and recommendation and all those things, they are not taught in random. Rather, we have an end goal of building an NLP product for movies. That's how we start. And even our Streamlit visualization and every technique that we develop will be a feature that is added in the product that is used by these movie production houses to organize their movies, convert movies from one language into other or other things, etc. And also in the very end, I touch upon quite a lot on GPT-3 and how you can fully leverage it. So the course has one running central theme, which is we are building an NLP product called MoviePro.ai, and everything that we learned is a feature addition to that. And I will not bore other people long, but the short thing is that if you just go to ramsri.ai/NLP, you will see a button view curriculum. That view curriculum tells exactly what is taught in every week, and a lot of content, at least a good 25% of the content is on my YouTube channel. So you can kind of get an idea on my YouTube channel what kind of topics are taught. There are some guest lectures as well, because I bring in practitioners who are building NLP products, etc. So last time we had 2 guest lectures, one on how you can use NLP and SEO, search engine optimization, and build the next generation SEO product using NLP. And the third thing is actually building NLP products with Bubble, etc. That's about in short, but I will not bore others with a lot of course, stuff here.
One last question from my side. If you have
Sure.
any queries or kind of thing, can we text you on LinkedIn with any subject line? Because you often have many messages.
Yeah,
With
yeah.
what kind of do we text you with some subject line about regarding our queries?
Got it. So do one thing. My email is ramsri@question.ai. I'll also
Okay.
write it in the chat. I think
Okay.
it's better if you, because that is directly clear for people to reach out and ask it. LinkedIn messages I have gotten lost a lot of times. Okay.
Okay.
You can directly write to me at ramsri@question.ai. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask.
Ramsey, thank you very much for this wonderful session. It was a really enlightening session.
Awesome.
So one question I have is that whenever we are doing sort of feature engineering sort of stuff, so there are two things, like either we can do word vectorization or we can do sentence vectorization. So which one should we do? Could you throw some light on that, and like how we should choose?
So usually before the transformer era, what used to happen is that even if you're doing sentence vectorization, it used to be just accumulation of all the word vectors, averaging them out. And there was a lot of information loss because of that. And my short answer is, if you're directly dealing at a sentence level, directly start with sentence vectors. That means if you're doing some classification, perhaps you can use BERT, etc., to convert your sentence into a vector. Basically, you take the end layer, CLS vector, etc., and operate on that. Or if you're just trying to do some clustering, etc., directly use sentence transformer models from sbert.net. It's very easy to use. Basically, you pass in your whole context or sentence and you get back a vector. Now you can compare those vectors, or you can fine tune those vectors or for some other tasks, etc. So the answer is that if you want to get the best accuracies, always use sentence transformers or BERT based transformer sentence vectors, and then fine tune on that for the particular task. The reason why people use word vectors and averaging word vectors still is because transformer algorithms are computationally heavy, and they are, they require more resources, etc., to deploy. Whereas word vectors, etc., you can just store individual words and their vectors, and you can just average them out even in a Lambda function using serverlessly, etc. And similarly, sometimes if you want to do better than just word vector averaging, you can do TF-IDF averaged word vector, because word vector averaging means for every word I'm going to put equal weight and average. But sometimes if you have something like Ramsri is going to college, then is and going are like stop words which do not have much importance, right? If you calculate TF-IDF, then Ramsri and college will have high TF-IDF values. So it's just distributing the average weights instead of being average, giving slightly higher weights to Ramsri and college and averaging out. So you can do TF-IDF averaged word vector. Simply TF-IDF averaged word vector is also a fast and less computationally heavy way to do it. So that if you're delivering something at scale for millions of audience, you cannot use transformer inference and get hundreds and $1,000s in inference cost, right? So if you want to do something very quick and fast and more or less you can trade off a little bit of accuracy, you can go with TF-IDF averaged word to vec, or else you should take the transformer sentence vectors, etc. path. Yeah.
Okay, so like to if my, like just to make sure my understanding is correct, so if we want more accuracy, we should focus on sentence vectorization, and if we want to have more computationally efficient models, then use word vectorization, right?
That is absolutely true. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself. Go ahead, Mayresh. Yeah.
Yeah, hello Ramasri sir. I am from third year student from Pune PICT College. So I wanted to ask you about, as a fresher, I am exploring NLP since last 1 year. But I have a doubt that do the companies or the startups prefer the fresher students for NLP jobs or internships? Or if how's the process to means how's the condition in India?
So one thing is that as a fresher, first of all, getting a job right out of college is tough, and getting an NLP position, not just NLP, but anything in the AI ML position is slightly tougher, to be very honest. The only thing is there are roles, junior NLP roles that are available, but since they are only handful, there might be competition for it. The only way to counter that is two ways. One is actually establish your interest as well as authority by picking up interesting NLP projects and mainly making YouTube videos or blogs or writing on LinkedIn and other social media, Twitter, etc. So establish authority in one way or the other to cut through the competition. And there is a second way, which is actually being part of the Slack channels of these open source companies. For example, if you take semantic search in NLP, there are a lot of companies like Gina.ai, VV8, Haystack, and I mean, vector search itself, there's another company called as Pinecone. So in all these companies, what you can do is you can go there, and in Slack channel, they have 100 people or something like that. Just be active on the Slack channels and contribute to open source, ask questions and do your projects on them, and keep writing blog posts on there, etc. And simply when one of them raises funding, and if you are just active on social channels as well as promoting them, etc., you will have a much fairer advantage to get your first job than all the pool of candidates who are out there. So I would rather advise either network in groups, not just Slack channels. It could be you're part of some Kaggle group, or if you're part of some other hosted community group of AI or things like that. Either through network or through authority, these are the ways where you can get your first job in NLP. But like I mentioned, the jobs in NLP and research and other things in general in AI, they are fewer at the start. So until you establish your career and get your first job in that, there might be slight friction in getting there, and that's expected. So don't get discouraged. Like I mentioned, tap into networks, being part of interesting Slack groups of companies, and just be active there. Even if you don't get a job, you can ask for small internship position to write 1 or 2 blogs every month and publish about them, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, that helps us. Thank you.
Cool.